Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me today and for all of you in attendance for your attention on this really important topic. My name is Elise Belknap. I am the early childhood mental health consultant for Champaign County Head Start. We serve about 600 children between the ages of about 6 weeks to 5 as we prepare them for kindergarten. This afternoon, I'm hoping to share with you our journey that we've been on for addressing equity issues in our community, in our schools, and how we have focused on social emotional learning to do that in our programming. So first, I'm going to describe to you our community and what kind of shape of inequity issues. Second, I'll describe programming and staffing design. And third, I'll describe outcomes and future goals that I hope that we work on. And lastly, I'm going to share a story about a particular kiddo that we have worked with and had success with using this model. There's more than one kid, but I can't talk about them all. So first of all, welcome to Champaign County, Illinois. We're in central Illinois. We're known for being a college town. We're home of the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. We have about 200,000 folks who live in this community. While we do have Champaign-Urbana has a metropolitan area, we're very rural. So the metropolitan area is about 34 square miles, whereas the county as a whole is 998 square miles. So that can give you a sense of we have a really dense center, and we have a lot of communities out in our farmland as well. We're often described as micro-urban, which I think it might be code for we're a small town with crime. You'll get a sense of what that looks like and how that impacts our families in the next couple of slides. So first of all, I wanted to just touch base on equity being the kind of focus of our conversation today. At Head Start, we have performance standards, right, that prohibit the expulsion of students for behavior issues. And that's been really important for changing the conversation around behavior. But luckily, in around 2017, our governor signed a bill that prohibits the expulsion of students from preschool education and early childhood programs that are funded by our Illinois State Board of Education. And that's also gone a long way in supporting this move towards addressing the inequity around suspension and expulsion. So in our community in particular, and this might sound familiar to other communities out there, I don't know that we're special in this in any way, unfortunately, but poverty is a real issue for us. We have a higher percentage of food insecurity than Illinois on average, but that poverty is impacting families disproportionately. So 40% of our Black children in our community live in poverty in comparison to 10% of our white children. And so you can see that play out, right? And there's historical and structural reasons for that. But it is, you see the impact in the classrooms for sure. You might also find that this slide feels familiar in your community as well, right? These are the concerns of our community members: mental health, alcohol, drug abuse, gun violence, obesity, domestic violence. We have a pretty high crime rate for the size of town we are. The national median is crime rate is 4 per 1,000 residents, and ours is 7.27. And so I want to just identify, right, that you can't address inequity and improve social emotional skills if you're ignoring the impact of trauma on our communities and more specifically on brain development, right? And that as a preschool is something that we pay a lot of attention to. So specifically our students, right, we serve around 417 of those children are living at or below the poverty line, which is part of the mission of Head Start, right, is to serve children who are high or living it with risk. We have children who have IEPs, who are experiencing homelessness, that are involved with DCFS, and are impacted by gun violence. And this data is representative of just within this last school year, like to date, that this is, these are some of the issues that our kids are facing. We have children with incarcerated parents with scores in their ages and stages questionnaire, social emotional, that are above the cutoff. Children who have transient caregivers or divorced parents, children who've been exposed to domestic violence. And all of those sort of trauma factors impact not just their emotional health or behavioral health, but their physical health as well. And you can see that play out in our families and in our community. So first of all, I wanted to identify how we are looking to address that. At our sites, we are really focused on promotion of social emotional learning, prevention around social emotional learning, and then intervention lastly. And we do this in a variety of ways. We are one of the primary, instead of a traditional discipline model, we practice conscious discipline, which was created by Dr. Becky Bailey. And that really focuses on promoting this understanding of the brain state model, and that if we can understand the brain and how brain handles stress, then we can adjust our interventions to match where an individual is in their brain state. So for example, if you're in your executive brain and your prefrontal lobes, you can learn, right? You can pay attention, you can focus. But when you're stressed, you're emotional, or you're in fight or flight back in your brainstem, you're not going to be able to learn from an experience, which is why these sort of traditional discipline models aren't very effective in terms of reducing behaviors in the long run. So using that frame for our teachers has been really helpful in promoting the importance of social emotional learning, switching from this paradigm of traditional discipline, the way most of us have been raised, to a discipline model that focuses on learning and empathy. So we have then used that frame to integrate sort of prevention strategies around teaching coping skills, breathing techniques, self-regulation, and creating safe places in our classrooms for children to calm down. And I think it's been really important as we build those prevention strategies that we have to learn to interpret children's behavior as communication, right? We need to understand the meaning and purpose of a child's behavior so that we can teach them how to get their needs met in a more appropriate way, right? We're honoring their feeling. We're not asking them to not feel, as Rose was describing, but we are looking to help them get their needs met in a more appropriate or in a safer way. And this has to happen before the stress reaction starts with a child, when they're in their executive state of their brain. So when we get into interventions, that means that we're already at a place where the child is like escalated, they're in fight or flight, they're in an emotional state. And then our only job really can be about co-regulation, where we as an adult have to be calm in order to help that child be calm, so that way we can get them back to that executive state where they can learn from their experience. So we spend a lot of time on prevention as a primary focus, and that's been a shift for us in the last few years. So I want to also point out that you can't really you can't just do intervention, right? You have to actively teach self-regulation strategies and emotional vocabulary before the behaviors start. Otherwise, when children get upset and we only are focused on interventions, we're accidentally teaching that child that in order to get their needs met, they have to get really upset. They have to get escalated before they can get that hug that their sensory system needs or get that emotional connection. But we want them to learn how to ask for that and get what they need before the behaviors kick in. And that's been a shift, right, again, from that traditional discipline model, which all happens after the behavior. So that's really been, right, a mind shift for our staff over time. So conscious discipline, it sits within a larger model. If you're familiar with CSEPL, or the pyramid model for supporting social emotional competence in infants and young children, this helps us frame the work that we do and how a child moves through the support systems that we have, so that we're not just spending all of our time up at the top of that pyramid. We're also looking at how can we make changes in the classroom so that this routine or this classroom is more conducive to supporting this child. How do we change how we relate to somebody? Does this child feel like somebody likes them and loves them in the classroom? And if not, how do we make that change? What skills, right, when you look at prevention, targeted social emotional supports, what skills does this child need to be able to be successful and meet these social emotional goals that we have for them? And what intensive interventions can be put in place across the school and family lives when we get to that very top of the pyramid? We've been lucky in that part of how we've addressed these issues at schools that we have a unique source of funding. Our mental health board has given us 2 grants. One funds my role as the social emotional development specialist, and the other funds the social skills and prevention coaches, which are mental health assistants. And we've been able to hire 3. We have 4 sites, but we have 3 that, 1 at each site, and I operate kind of as the 4th. And these coaches function as an extension of my role to provide social emotional support and learning and parent education and referrals. And they really are that prevention as opposed to that intervention model. So you can see as this maps on in terms of our roles, that work prevention with our teachers through practice-based coaching as a strategy. All of our classrooms engage in practice-based coaching around social emotional learning. And they help with building attachment between teachers and students. And then when it comes to that second level of targeted intervention, our coaches work with teachers to identify areas of need and growth for the students, and help them identify strategies for them to learn those social emotional skills. And then when it gets to the point where we're seeing persistent behaviors in the classroom that are challenging and disruptive or possibly unsafe, then it starts to involve all the stakeholders. I'm there, the coaches are there, families, teachers, family advocates, and we engage in a child study process that's really intensive. So primarily, right, things that have already been mentioned in our in the previous presentations, we're focusing on the building blocks of emotional intelligence and resilience, even right at 6 weeks to 5. These are things that we're working on. And then when it gets to the point of these more intensive interventions, it takes a lot of effort on everybody. So it really incentivizes all that prevention work. Because when we get to this point, there's functional behavioral assessments, there's assessments, the ASPSE, the DECA, we're doing ongoing data collection and observations about frequency of behavior and antecedents, behavior consequences. We're collaborating with families, and we're looking to refer children for further evaluation or services. And our coaches play a really important role in kind of carrying out these strategies, doing kindergarten readiness groups, friendship groups, creating visual aid materials to support but we're using the ASQSE, the DECA, the class, and the TPOT in order to do that. We've seen improvement, but I think we're always learning, and we have a lot more to go, I think, before I'm going to be happy, I guess. So I'll say our future goals, right? We want to be trauma informed. That's our primary goal. So trauma screening for students is really important. Providing consistent reflective supervision for our staff. We need to treat our teachers as we treat our students, because burnout is real, stress is real. And I wish that we had the capacity to do trauma-informed parenting classes as well. So that's a long-term goal for me. And lastly, I'll say we've had one of our children that we've had success with, right? He's experienced all the things that we had described in the previous couple of slides, right? He witnessed domestic violence. This was his very first classroom experience. He was living in a homeless shelter with his mom. And when he started the school year, he was really agitated. He was pacing, a lot of hypervigilance in the classroom. But what it looked like, right, was hitting, screaming, being unsafe in the classroom. It made it hard for him to make and maintain friendship with his peers and to build relationships with his teachers. So our coach worked with him, right, prevention strategies a couple times a week, helping him learn how to calm down through breathing, self-regulation strategies. The coach also worked with teachers on how to recognize, switching their mind around uh, behaviors, seeing it as hypervigilance as opposed to a bad behavior, which changes the way you might approach him. So now when he's upset, he can use those breathing strategies. He calms himself down. He is excited to learn. We've seen incredible progress for him, and he's even generalized these skills into other environments, like when they go shopping with his mom or playing at home with his sister. So just focusing on prevention with him, we didn't even have to get to that point of intensive interventions. We saw some real improvement for him. So I know that was kind of quick and dirty, but I want to thank you for your time, and I will pass the presentation back.